את הווליום לתקרה, ביום של חופש שכזה, הסוף הוא רק ההתחלה. אז נרקוד עד אור הבוקר בין עשרות האנשים, כי לא עולים בכלל ביוקר דברים קטנים שמשמחים, כמו איזה יום יפה, בוא נעצור את השעון ונחיה ביום יפה כמו ביומנו הראשון. איזה יום יפה, בוא נסתובב מחוף לחוף.
Well, I think that's my cue. So, good evening. My name is Michael Kessler, and I'm privileged to serve as the tri-state president of the Jewish National Fund, USA. I'd like to welcome everyone on this Zoom to the 8th Annual Wine and Water, hosted by Westchester and Southern Connecticut. We're featuring tonight guest speakers, Tali Tzor and Josh Greenstein. I'd also like to thank the co-chairs, Brenda and Michael Ben. And I'd like to thank the whole entire event committee. Melissa will share the screen and you can see who that committee is. It's led by the president of Westchester and Southern Connecticut, Diana Sklar. I want to thank all of you for your hard work putting this event together, as well as the great JNF professional staff who work so hard. I'd also like to recognize tonight's sponsors, Tulip sponsor Emily Golden, and the following wine crate sponsors, the Benz, David Goldman, Carrie Mew, the Halperns, and Don Altman.
Good evening, and thank you so much for joining us for our 8th annual Water and Wine event hosted by Westchester and Southern Connecticut. We can't think of a better way to conclude our celebration of Tu B'Shvat, the New Year of the Trees, than by attending a JNF event. We come together tonight, like we have so many times over the past 12 months, virtually, and want to start out by sending our prayers to all of those on the front lines of the pandemic. Hopefully, we will be able to be together in person for our 9th annual Water and Wine event. Indeed, hopefully well before that.
What is our JNF story? When Brenda and I were given the honor of chairing this event, our instructions were 1, invite your friends, and 2, share your JNF story. The first instruction was clear enough, and we are thrilled to see so many friends and family with us here tonight. The second instruction, however, required some deeper thought. You see, we have a confession to make. Between the two of us, we have visited Israel only one time, and that was 32 years ago, when I had a little less gray hair. Perhaps ours is not the typical JNF story. We cannot tell you about the time we participated in this mission or that, the many times we visited Jerusalem or the Dead Sea, or the times we celebrated bar bat mitzvahs with loved ones. We cannot regale you with tales of myriad adventures had and friends made, or moments of deep meaning and discovery uncovered, because we haven't had them yet. Truth be told, we are at the beginning of our JNF journey, and we wouldn't have it any other way.
Over the past 2 years, we have had the absolute pleasure of serving on the Westchester and Southern Connecticut Regional Board of JNF, participating in this event and various board meetings, and taking a virtual tour through the history of water in Israel. We have learned that JNF does so much more than plant trees, although planting trees is clearly an apt metaphor for all that JNF does to support our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael. We have thoroughly enjoyed giving our time and financial support as best we could, and we realize that this is only the beginning, that we've only begun to scratch the surface of our connections with Eretz Yisrael and the Jewish people. As American Jews in 2021, we feel more deeply now than ever the need to support Israel and set the right example for our 3 young children, who with each passing day continue to grow up in leaps and bounds.
We want to thank each of you for joining us this evening to enjoy some wonderful Israeli wines and learn about the remarkable history of water in Israel and the progress that continues to happen at this very moment. Israel truly is a paragon to be emulated in this regard. Thank you to those who have shared their JNF stories with us over the past couple of years. And to those of you who, like us, are just beginning their JNF story, what a wonderful step you are taking by being here tonight. Thank you everyone for what you have given already, and please consider making a further generous donation tonight or in the days or weeks ahead. To thrive and make more miracles happen, Israel needs JNF's continued support, and JNF in turn needs ours. Please consider using the link in the chat or that will be texted to you this evening. Donation cards were also included with wine packages. If you have any questions whatsoever, Brenda and I would love the opportunity to speak with you. Again, thank you so very much.
Now, without further ado, we'd like to introduce Joshua Greenstein, a Westchester neighbor and Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing of Israel Wine Producers Association. IWPA was established to promote Israel as a fine wine growing region. And I know we're all looking forward to making l'chaim with Josh tonight. So please welcome Josh Greenstein.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for that great story. And, you know, I'm a local Westchester resident here. I live in Armonk, New York. I'm originally from upstate. I'm originally from Albany and found my way down here. I'm fifth generation wine business. My families were bootleggers during Prohibition. And then they worked their way through the business, eventually owning a distributor and this and that. My father still lives up in Albany as a salesman still to this day. And I have a cool job. I get to run around the US promoting the good, the fun, the positive things coming out of Israel. And in my case, it's wine. It's great wine. It's amazing wine. It's not that wine that when you were a little kid and you were taught about Israeli wines, or, you know, that you thought it was this sweet, syrupy thing coming out of the bottle. It's come a long way. And the joke that I make is I tell people that Israel's been making wine for about 5,000 years. A roundabout number. They just got good at it, Bill. All right. It took them a long time, Bill, to understand how to grow wine out in Israel. But with technology and their passion for water, which we can tie into this whole thing so easily, it's amazing to see where the wine industry is today and to see what they're producing. You know, close to 400 wineries are in Israel today and growing. People are opening up small boutique wineries. The big ones are growing bigger. The small ones are growing bigger. The nothing ones are growing a little bit. And it's amazing to see what everybody's doing. So we'll talk a little more about Israel as we're tasting some wines, but it's been a long day for everybody. All right. Everyone take a deep breath, you know, get ready, stretch it out a little bit, and let's go open some wine. And if you opened it before, even better. My kind of people, you're ready for the party before we got there. So the white wine that we have in front of us is a really cool blend. We chose this specifically to showcase, you know, Israel at its finest. And most of you have probably had a Chardonnay or a Pinot Grigio or a Sauvignon Blanc, or, you know those white grapes. But what this is a mix up, this is the fun blend. This is a Viognier Gewürztraminer Colombard. So we were on this call a little early. We had a little pregame show, you know, we were all opening our bottles and doing our fun stuff. And someone said, wow, this really smells good. And if you smell this white wine or you don't have this white wine, you want to smell it, close your eyes. Imagine like white peach and like clean white peach and clean fruit, really clean fruit. And this is what you get out of this. This is just a really fresh, aromatic white wine. And it's beautiful to start the meal, to start the day. This is a good, I guess we're still, you know, we're in Corona time. So it's a good afternoon wine with your lunch. You know, we want to feel like we're in Europe. You guys can drink a little wine at lunch. And this is a great white wine. It's just simple, easy. And what makes these wineries so beautiful and so amazing is their stories. And this one is a great story about a winemaker named Asaf Paz. He bounced around from a couple different wineries. Now him and his sister are running this Vitkin winery themselves. And what's really cool is most of the winemakers in Israel, when I talk about them, they went to UC Davis in California to go study and learn, or they went to Bordeaux, or they went to Tuscany because they loved Italian wines. This guy was a baker, all right? He liked baking. And personally, I love baking. I love cooking. I love being like in the kitchen with the flour all over the place. It's kind of like winemaking too. It's got the yeast and it's got to be so perfect. I mean, so perfect to get it to be what you're trying to make into that wine. And think about it. You want it to be perfect, not just when you're tasting it out of the vat or the bottle, but you want it to be perfect in 3 years, 5 years, 20 years down the line. Like you got a lot riding on your shoulders when you're, you know, drinking some of these wines. But in the case of this white wine, this is not something you want to cellar or sit down that long. This is a fun, fresh wine that you should be drinking yesterday. You know, it's just fun and easy, and it really goes well with a lot of food. You know, the fishes and the chickens of the world. One of the things, that question that I get asked, a lot of people are like, you know, I'm having steak for dinner and I really don't love red wine, but I like the way I'm eating it. So, you know, I say you open up a bottle of white wine, you pour yourself a glass while you're cooking your steak, you finish it, and then when you're done, you go to your red wine. So you can have both. And just a little bit about, you know, wine storage, because for those of you who open 2 bottles of wine tonight and are going to finish them, pound it out. Good job, guys. Pound it out. Good job if you're going to finish both bottles. If you're not, what you can do is white wine, take the cork out of the bottle, stick it in upside down. It usually goes in a lot easier than the right side up, the way you had it. If you take the cork upside down, you stick it in, shove it down as far as you can, stick it in the fridge on its side or standing up for 2-3 days, maybe, in my opinion. You gotta have a white wine. My favorite thing to do with the white wine when we're done, I see some parents and some kids running around and some of these things. How many of you have kids and you have some fruit left over? You got little strawberries chopped up. You got some pineapple shot up. Mike, you know what I'm talking about. So what you do now is we're making a sangria. We have a half a bottle of white wine left. We got pineapples and strawberries that we're about to throw away, or peaches, whatever it is. We chop them up. We put them in something and we put that in the fridge. We put a little brandy, maybe make it a little stronger, make it a little nice. And then when you're serving it, add some seltzer or some ginger ale or something cool also. So, you're opening 2 bottles of wine in one night. Sometimes they go bad, or cook with them. They make great, a lot of people have been doing a lot of stuff with some chefs online lately. And I never heard of it, but a lot of them have been telling me that they keep like a jar in their fridge and they just keep whatever white wine or wine they have left, they just put it in, and that's their cooking wine. And they just keep it in there as like their backup. They need something, they have to run out to the store for wine. They have something to cook with. And I think Asaf the baker would appreciate that you're using his wine in a recipe also. So it's really cool to see that white wines also in Israel. A couple of years ago, they weren't that popular. I mean, a lot of people were only drinking red. They were going to Cabernet. Like, Cabernet is still king. All right, everyone loves Cabernet still. Most of the sales coming of red wines is Cabernet. But I always tell people, try new stuff, try new grapes, try new things. That's how we find out what we like and we don't like. But with this white specifically, it's just amazing to see these grapes coming together to make such a fun Mediterranean blend. And you can really imagine yourself, what do you guys stay at? The Carlton, right? I remember running into Russell once outside the Carlton on the boardwalk on one of his jogs. And Michael told me once he does jog in a full suit and tie. It's true. He runs in the full suit and tie. It's amazing. He had sneakers on, but a full suit and tie, like he was ready to go have a meeting like right after. It's amazing, that guy. So, it's hot in Israel. So you want a glass of white wine when it's refreshing. So now what's going on in Israel, and how many people on this Zoom are starting to drink rosés in the past 3 or 4 years and are really excited about rosés? All the rosés, by the way, from Israel, California, France, are all coming into the US right now. We're just starting to get them. They just landed at our doorsteps. California landed a couple days ago. France just came in. Like, I think yesterday I saw an email come through. So it's just really cool that the rosés are the freshest, and this is what the 2020 is coming out. And again, the sale of rosés and white wine in Israel is like this. They're growing. They're pairing it more with their food. They're pairing it more with their outside or whatever they happen to be doing. It's just really, really starting to grow. So I'll jump into the next wine that we're going to be tasting. We're going to be tasting a little red wine from a winery called Tulip Winery, right? And whenever I get the chance to tell the story of Tulip to new people that haven't heard the story, and I hope some of you have heard this great story, and I hope there's more of you that haven't heard this story and you can pass the story along, because that's what wine is. Wine is a great story. Wine has great background. In my opinion, there's no such thing as a bad bottle of wine. No one would ever put their name on it. No one would ever do it anymore. It's too expensive to waste your time to make bad wine. You might like it. Michael might like it, but I don't like it. It's not bad wine. It's just not my thing. So with a winery like Tulip, they're making only good wine. I'm not holding up the bottle that you guys have in front of you. I'm holding up something different just to show you guys. This is Tulip Black. This is their high-end black tulip. And why am I showing this one to you? Because of the story I'm about to tell you, and just remember the story while I talk about this label. So Roy Itzhaki is the owner of Tulip Winery. About 15 years ago, 20 years ago, he decided, him and his family, to open up a winery. And he said, I want to do 3 things. I want to produce good wine. I want to give people a good value for the money. And I want to help people while doing it. And how many wineries, are trying to help people? No, you're trying to make wine, you're trying to have parties, you're trying to do all this fun stuff. What is Tulip doing? Tulip is going out and opened up in the middle of a kibbutz for special needs adults, men and women that weren't living at home anymore. And they all came together in this kibbutz and live at this kibbutz full time. And Tulip opened the winery in this kibbutz and gave people jobs and literally brought jobs to the community. And it wasn't like they were volunteering. They got paid. They had money. And some of them had money for the first time. There's a couple really cool stories. There was a gentleman that came to the community and he was 30-something years old and he was a mute and he just hadn't spoken a word. And then when he started working and talking and doing and feeling everything out, the joke is now the guy won't be quiet. He won't shut up. It's what he's doing is he found a way to make it interesting for himself to keep busy. And he's out there every day. He's got a girlfriend. They gossip. There's community things going on in the thing that it's amazing to see. And on top of all that, he wanted to make good wine, right, Roy? He's getting 90 points. Parker, wine enthusiast, spectator, from everything from the entry-level stuff that we're drinking now, the Just series. They make a Just Merlot and they make a Just Cabernet, okay? And these are the 2 wines in that series. And it's just amazing to see that this guy chose this angle, chose this place. It's a beautiful place. I think Michael, the gentleman who spoken before, he said that he had been up there. Listen, and it was great to hear, Michael and Brenda, your story about, you've only been to Israel once. And I was in the wine industry. I worked for Gallo. I worked for Yellowtail. I worked for all these companies. Never in a million years, and I'm 5th generation wine business, thought that I'd be representing brand Israel and thought I'd be selling something from Israel. And if you hear the passion in my voice, it's because I'm excited to be able to sell a cool, fun place. It makes it, Israel makes it easy for me. I can go out and you'd be surprised. It's not all my business is coming from Westchester or Connecticut or Brooklyn. I have a rep in Texas that's doing amazing right now. There's a lot of people, as we all know out there, that love Israel, support Israel, and would do anything for Israel. And that's what I'm here to do. And the next thing that I come across, a lot of people like, what can I do to help? How can we help support the Israeli wine industry? There's a lot of ways. If you're giving a gift to somebody, and instead of giving them that bottle of Opus or that bottle of Camus or that bottle of whatever, if you don't keep kosher, by the way, that's the first time I mentioned the K word the whole time, give them a bottle of wine from Israel. Or if you're giving a corporate gift or you're going to a restaurant, you're friends with the maitre d' at the restaurant, say, hey, you know what? Try some Israeli wines. You should have some Israeli wines on your list. It's really cool to be able to see, especially when you walk into a place, because look, we're all proud to be, supporting Israel and there for Israel and doing what we do. But it would be and every time we buy a bottle of wine or talk about the wine, think about what that's doing for the community and the economy and the water and all that fun stuff over there. It's really getting it all flowing. No pun intended. And my favorite part about water in Israel is the fact that they figured out how to do it the best. Drip irrigation, I'm sure many of you know, was founded in Israel and has literally helped pioneer the wine industry to a whole nother level. There's so many people using it all over the world. And there's also a new form of technology. I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's a thing that they put around the vine, and it's like a stress meter. And if the vine is getting too stressed out, it can tell what's going on and give more water to the vines. So it's just amazing to be able to see that what's going on with Israel. They've come a really long way, and they're starting to make some great wines. So I thank you guys all for joining. If you guys have any questions or anything for me, I think we're going to open it up, right?
If you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat.
And if not, just open the second bottle of wine and we'll get there later. But thank you, everybody. And I love supporting JNF with my local neighbors. I have, been many Zooms in the past couple months. This is kind of cool to see some people in my local area. So thank you guys for having me. And JNF team, keep doing the great work that you guys are doing. Thanks,
Josh,
guys.
I have one quick question before you head out. But why do stores have kosher but not real Israeli wine?
So it's interesting that you ask that. Has anyone ever heard of we have some Connecticut people on the call, right? Has anyone ever heard of a store called Total Wine? Total Wine and More is a liquor store chain in the US that's, I don't know, $1 billion industry. It's the largest retail chain out there. The guy's name that owns it is David Trone, okay? His personal, if you go to any Total Wine, pretty much any Total Wine that you go into, there'll be 2 things. There'll be 2 6-foot sections usually. One of them says kosher and one of them says Israel. One of my personal goals in this industry is to try to do what you're asking and get Israel sections into stores. It's growing, it's happening, it's falling under Mediterranean, it's falling under other. Some places are really starting to do it. Binny's in Chicago. Binny's has Israel sections and a bunch of them too. Total Wine is doing it, and then a lot of guys are following behind it. HEB is doing actually a big Easter program for me. Wines from Israel from Easter. So it's starting to take the next step.
Josh, I have a question. There is a kosher wine and there is a cooked kosher wine. And what is the difference between them?
So that's the scariest part of kosher. That's why everyone's scared out of their mind when they spent 50, 60, 70 bucks on a bottle of wine that's kosher. Oh crap, this is going to be awful. This is from my grandmother. This is made of chef. No. Okay, so kosher means someone observed the wine, right? Coke is kosher, Snapple's kosher, Ritz crackers are kosher. They're all kosher. It means nothing, right? So we can get past that for a second. Really quickly, Mavushal means flash pasteurized, okay? If you look up a winery called Bout Castel, it's one of the most expensive wineries in France, right? Really, really expensive wine, like high-end stuff. They do something called flash pasteurization on all their wines, okay? It's the same thing as Mavushal. So it's very similar. A lot of wineries do it. And I'll give you one more quick example. There's a wine called Drapier Champagne, okay? Drapier is a very famous champagne house across the world. Everyone knows it. Drapier now makes a kosher version for the kosher community, and they make it Mavushal, okay? Why am I telling you that? Because Drapier is one of the most established champagne houses in the world. And if they thought that Mavushal messed with their name, they wouldn't go anywhere near it. They wouldn't touch it. They wouldn't do it. Why? They don't need to. They're going to sell their wine otherwise. So if people are willing to put their name on products these days, like I went back to, Mavushal doesn't affect it. It's a BS thing that's in people's heads. Taste them side by side. You can taste them slight difference because of what happened, but it makes it more approachable, more available for us to drink and enjoy.
Josh, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
I had the opportunity to try a wine. The grape seeds were discovered archaeologically. They were 2,000 years old, and they were actually able to revive these things and create viable plants. So somebody a number of years ago in Israel gave me a bottle of this wine, the origins of which go back to biblical times.
One of those grapes is Dabuki, I believe. It's a white grape, Dabuki. I have to keep reminding myself how to say it. There's two other grapes of that, and guys are starting to play with that now. It's really cool in Israel. If there's any really big wine snobs out there that like, foo-foo guys, hi to you guys. I like it.
It is the only truly Israeli wine.
It's true. And they also make an Argamon over there. But what's really cool also is the winemaker from Barkan, which is the largest winery in Israel, just got his Master of Wine status. There's, I think, 350 masters of wine in the whole world. And he's playing a lot with those grapes like right now, because one of his projects was he wrote his thesis paper for this Master of Wine thing on the indigenous grapes and bringing them back. So he's playing with that and making it's fun. It's interesting. Mm-hmm. They're a hard sell, though.
Josh, are all Israeli wines kosher?
So majority of those 350 wineries are not kosher, but total production is way, way, way kosher because all the big boys are kosher and every grocery store, every hotel, and all that kind of stuff, as you guys know. But if you take anything else away, kosher does not affect quality in any way whatsoever. Otherwise, no one would be eating Ritz crackers. Like, they just be gross.
What is your favorite bottle of wine? What is your all-time favorite bottle of wine?
Depends on the situation, depends on the mood. And I never answer that question because it always is situational. It's always where you are and what you're doing and who you're with and how you're consuming it. It's really, and especially if I've had that wine before and I want to go back there to that in my head, sometimes that helps too. So wine is very situational.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys. And you can do the same thing with the red wine too. You can make sangria with that too if you don't finish it.
Great. Thank you so much, Josh. If there are any other questions, just feel free to put them in the chat. I am definitely enjoying the wines. I'm Jessica Levinson, and I am a member of the JNF Westchester Southern Connecticut Board. And it is my privilege to introduce you to a woman who has played an instrumental role in fulfilling Jewish National Fund's vision for the land and people of Israel for more than 28 years. She is a dedicated Zionist who served admirably in the IDF. Her professional life continues the legacy of her family, people who made Aliyah to Israel from all over the world. She is an energetic leader who has been dedicated to building Israel since founding a new community in the Galilee and now oversees JNF's task forces on water solutions and cutting-edge development in the Arava. And she is an insightful emissary who helps connect the American Jewish community, the Israeli people, and the KKL and JNF operations. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jewish National Fund's Chief Israel Emissary, Talia Tzur-Avner.
Thank you. And I'm happy to be with you tonight and happy Tu B'Shvat. It's not only Tu B'Shvat today, it's also this month is the 120th anniversary of the Jewish National Fund. We were founded in 1901 in January in Basel, Switzerland, in the Casino Hall. The organization was established, in order to purchase land in Israel and to make it possible for the new immigrants to make Aliyah and to come to descend to Israel, to Eretz Israel back then. And Tu B'Shvat, believe it or not, is also the day of the establishment of the Israeli Knesset, which is the Israeli parliament. Yes, true, the Israeli parliament is not so stable. We're running into the fourth elections within a year and a half. Yet it's the birthday of the Knesset, of the Israeli parliament. So we're celebrating with the wine. And of course, I will start with a huge statement. There was no wine, Josh, and ladies and gentlemen, without water. And Israel wouldn't have water without all the innovation and the preparation of the generations before us. So I have prepared a short presentation and I'm gonna share it with you. And we're gonna learn traditionally, as you do for 8 years, about wine, water, and the connections between the two of them. So Melissa, if you would allow me to share my screen. Okay, I want to start with the former Israeli ambassador to the UN, Ron Prosor, who said, many countries may not support us, but the world is thirsty for our knowledge. And he speaks about water. On one hand, there is a market for bias against Israel. And on the other hand, there's also a demand for Israeli know-how, and we have the demand. So let's see what's the Israeli today is considered one of the water leaders around the world, a country, a small country, surrounded by 22 Arab countries. For many years, we didn't have peace with any of them. Today, we have peace treaties with Jordan and Egypt. Yet, Israel had to plan its way in terms of preparing, water and sufficient food for the next generations. And in 1948, when the country, before even the country was established, the British mandate limited the Aliyah quota because they said you don't have sufficient water for more than 1 million people. You already have 600,000 people. You're not going to survive it without more water. Today, the population has grown by 14 times. Israel counts more than 9 million people, supplies water to more than 12 million people, and that with 50% less precipitation than what we had in 1948. So obviously, the Israeli roadmap of the water economy was very successful, and Israel did it right. And I would like to go through the challenges and successes of Israel together with you to understand what has happened over here. First of all, smart governance. It was announced and decided by the first Prime Minister Ben-Gurion and his parliament and government that water is a national asset. Nobody can drill water, pump water, use water, treat water without the permission of the government. There's a central water authority for the entire state of Israel, and they control it. It's unlike the United States, where if you own a land, if you own the piece of land, you own the water facilities or the water assets as well. Technology, Josh mentioned the drip irrigation. There are over 2,000 Israeli water startups today currently working on different aspects of innovation in water. Yes, drip irrigation is something that we all know, but there are many more, and we will mention them in a second. Education for saving water, for using water smartly, from the kids in the kindergarten, all the way to the audience who sits and watches Israeli TV and sees the commercials, calling the audience, calling the public to save water, to use water carefully, to think of every drop of water when they use it. And the crown, I would say, is the wastewater treatment. Israel reuses 85% of its sewage and turns it into good water for agriculture. There's a very good chance that, by the way, it brings it to a level that you can drink it, but we use it only for agriculture. I can almost assure you that the wine that you're drinking tonight, and that was probably watered, irrigated by drip irrigation, which is an Israeli company, Netafim, was also watered by recycled water that was treated by the country and stored in 250 water reservoirs that the Jewish National Fund built and placed all over Israel, all the way from the Negev in the Arava to the Galil and the Golan. There are 250 water reservoirs. Israel is #1 in the world in water recycling. Israel recycles 85% of its sewage, and the numbers are only growing because the more population we have, the more sewage we have, the more population we have, the more need we have for food and agriculture, and hence the growing need for water. After Israel comes Spain with 17%, and in the United States, less than 5% of the sewage is treated. These are just a few pictures taking you to Israel to show you how a water reservoir is looked like. This one is in the Lower Galilee. This one is in the Negev. The Negev covers about 60% of the land of Israel. This is a desert, and this desert has become the place where all the Jaffa oranges are growing these days. There's no more oranges in Tel Aviv or in Jaffa. They're all growing in the Negev, all watered by the water reservoirs with the recycled water in the Jewish National Fund reservoirs. Another one in the Lower Galilee, one by Mount Tabor, and so on. So we spoke about drip irrigation, Netafim. There are other companies, but Netafim is the first one, and Netafim is the largest one. Very simple technology, just taking pipes with holes, but with the ability to measure the minerals, to measure the amount of water that you water, to sense the root of the plant, to know when to water it, etc., etc. The company is located in Kibbutz Hatzerim, near Beersheba, but as I said, there are hundreds and thousands other water companies and water technologies in Israel. Think about producing water from the air. We have humidity in the air. There's a company by the name of Watergen, Israeli company, that produces within 30 minutes water from the air and can produce it either for domestic use or for army units in the desert and in places where they are located, not connected to the water grid. Think about systems that can find out leaks in the old infrastructure of water. Do you know that the city of New York loses every day 80 million cubic meter of water because of leaks in the system? And it costs more money to fix the leaks than to protect it. So these leaks by Israeli technology, Israeli water technology, can be detected in 2 seconds on the screen, sending crews immediately to the spot, whether it's 100 miles from Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, in the Negev or in the Galil, and fix these leaks. Desalination, another water technology, very simple, sounds like Chinese, very simple. You're pumping water from the sea, in our case from the Mediterranean, and within 30 minutes, by reverse osmosis, you take the brine out of the water, throw it or transfer it back to the sea, and get sweet, drinkable water that today is 60% of the Israeli drinking water. So what happened in Israel through the years, because of 50% less precipitation, We could not pump anymore the Kinneret, which was our largest source of natural water in the north, from where we built a national water grid and led water or transfer water all over Israel. We cannot pump water from the Kinneret anymore. We have to be very careful with the water that we have in the aquifer, which means the underground water. And there was such a severe drought by 2008 that we were speaking with Erdogan in Turkey as to how to import water from Turkey to Israel. This was luckily denied by Erdogan, and there was no other option but building 5 desalination plants along the Mediterranean. They supply today 60% of the domestic use of the Israeli water, and for some communities, such as, in Chalutza, all the way on the border between Egypt and Israel, they need to use desalinated water also for their agriculture because they are not connected to the national water grid. Last but not least, Israeli people have quota of water. They cannot use as much as they want. They can use as much as they want, but they will have to pay much more than for the first quota for a family with 2 parents, 2 kids, 3 kids, etc., etc. So Israelis are willing to pay as much as it costs. Just by comparison, in Jordan, our neighbor to the east, they have water in their faucet only once a week. And that is with the support of Israel, because according to the peace treaty that was signed with Jordan in 1994, Israel gives to Jordan every year 50 million cubic meters from the Kinneret, from the same Sea of Galilee that we stopped pumping because there is no flow into the Kinneret from the rivers in the north. So we said 60% of the drinking water from the desalination and more than 50% of the water used for agriculture comes from this recycled water, meaning comes from the reservoirs that JNF has built through the years, and there is a request to build more. In my opinion, whenever I give a talk, whether it is about Israel in general, or the water, or the Arava, or JNF and what we're doing, this is the most important slide. Because this slide shows you that yes, today we count about 9 million people, but 30 years from today, we will be 16 million people. And think back, you will realize that Israel has grown by more than 1 million people every decade. And for that, you need to prepare. That doesn't just happen. You need to think of the infrastructure and the housing, and of course the water, because after oxygen, the next, the second most important commodity is water. There's no life without the water. You need to think about the kids. You need to think about the absorption. You need to think about so many things you need to prepare. And luckily, the generation that built the country, that built the state of Israel, thought about the future generations. And we are here today thinking of Israel, not only of the present of Israel, but also of the future. And for that, to be able to supply whatever we need to supply, including water, we need to think and plan today. So how do we close the water gap? Because the population is growing. The more the population is growing, there is no even correlation, because the need for water grows even more, because the laptop that you're using and the chair that you're sitting on and the car that you're driving and the wine that you're drinking and everything that we're using requires water. You cannot produce anything without water. So how do you get more water? Or how do you close the gap of the challenge of, water scarcity? By water saving. Yes, education, promotions, thinking how much to use. Drip irrigation is water saving, etc., etc. Wastewater reuse, recycled, yes, we're around 85% of recycling, but we can grow to even 95. And remember, the more population we have, the more sewage we have, the more food we need to produce, etc., etc. So it's a cycle. And desalination, we're planning to build another 2 desalination plants, one in Akko in the north and another one in the center of Israel. And if, things between Israel and Jordan will work out, we're gonna have a third one in Aqaba, across the Red Sea from Eilat, that will serve both the Jordanians and the Israelis. So what has JNF done through the years in Israel? First of all, main fact is that due to JNF water initiatives, we've added about 15% to the water consumption in Israel, 15% of water, by building 250 water reservoirs. And there's a request from Israel's water authority from JNF to build another 90 water reservoirs. Rehabilitation and restoration of rivers. I don't know how many of you have been to, let's take, Israel has 31 rivers. None of them is the Mississippi or the Missouri. Even the Jordan River has, more reputation than water. Yet it is very important to rehabilitate the rivers and the creeks, because underneath them we have the aquifer, and the aquifer can get contaminated by dry riverbed or contaminants that run into the rivers, and it is very important to clean them and to rehabilitate them. And I always, when I speak about water, I always say water is not only water. Water has an environmental aspect, and this is an environmental aspect, and we'll see the Beersheba River in a second. And I'm sorry, just one second, Melissa. Okay, thank you, Melissa. Melissa, I asked Melissa to let me know if I'm running, too late, but I'm okay. So rivers, we're gonna see Beersheba River in a second. Building wastewater treatment plants locally, and even the local desalination plants in places like the Arava. Drilling, JNF has helped 10 years ago in drillings 1.5 mile underneath the topsoil in the Galilee, pumping ancient water of 50,000 years ago. This water, according to the farmers in the Galilee, in the last 5 years when we had a severe drought in the north and we could not pump from the Kinneret, this water from the Shamir drilling, the JNF has helped them survive, helped them water their fields, helped them make their living. Education of young generations. I'm going to show you pictures in a second. JNF built rain harvesting waters for elementary schools, educating more than 90,000 children in elementary schools as to how to catch the water from the rain, use it in their bathroom, use it in their gardens. And also we're supporting an international competition for high school kids in water innovation. Last but not least, research and development. Guys, 60% of Israel is desert. Israel has no natural sources of water. The rivers in the north are drying, the Kinneret is drying up. Farmers in the Arava, all the way in the south, cannot grow a cherry tomato or a watermelon or even grapes in Arad. They have wineries in Arad, they have wineries all over the Negev. They cannot grow anything without the R&D telling them what to use, how often to water, what minerals to put, what species of the grapes they should grow, etc., etc. All these R&Ds all over Israel are supported by Jewish National Fund. So a short visit to Beersheba River and Lake, those who have been in Israel 15, 20 years ago, remember that the Beersheba riverbed was filled with tons of garbage and contractors' garbage from all over the Negev, and used cars and wheels, you name it. Everything that you want to find, you could find over there. JNF cleaned the place, renovated, rehabilitated, planted and built beautiful promenades along the 8 Mile riverbed, bridges, the largest amphitheater in the Negev. New neighborhoods were built facing the park because now it's a gorgeous park. And the crown these days is the new lake that is like, it looks like a blue lake with natural water, although this is recycled water from the city of Beersheba. And this is the Jewish National Fund beautifying and creating the hub of the Negev, the capital of the Negev, as the beautiful center to make people, feel like coming, visiting, spending time over there, living, of course, live over there. This is another reservoir located in the largest, with Tu B'Shvat today. It's the New Year for the trees, largest Israeli forest. All the forests were planted by men, right? 260 million trees were planted by Jewish National Fund. But the largest forest in Israel is located in the desert, planted by men, and the US Forest Service comes every year to learn from the JNF foresters on the ground in Israel how you plant trees in the desert without irrigation, protecting the environment and making the desert bloom. Sorry, I spoke about the rain harvesting systems. These are the kids in the elementary schools using or taking water to water their gardens, over 90,000 Israeli kids. So to summarize, yes, Israel is a role model for the world. A lot of countries come to Israel to learn from Israel how to overcome the water scarcity and how to manage their water assets. The Kinneret is drying up. I'm just reminding ourselves where we are today. There are still areas in Israel by the Egyptian border, in the Arava all the way south, that are not connected to the national water grid, and they need to create their own or to produce their own water. Population is growing and will be doubled by 2050. We are located in the Middle East. We are isolated and surrounded by 22 Arab countries, and Israel will always have to be self-sufficient in terms of water and food. So preparing and planning today for future generations is the most important thing that we can think and do today. Manufacture and store clean water, and if we're not going to do it, we will reach 2050 and then 2100 without sufficient infrastructure and water for Israel. So as I said, first of all, you're all invited to join the Water Task Force of the Jewish National Fund and be more involved in the water initiatives and water projects that we're doing in Israel. And always remember, water is not just water. Water is an environmental aspect. Water is a message of a positively Israel changing. Josh said that he likes to go and speak about Israel and show and let people drink the Israeli wines. We need to change the conversation about Israel from the conflict and the fights and the dilemmas and the problems that we have over there to the positive Israel, what Israel is doing good for the world. And in managing its water economy and overcoming its water scarcity, Israel is #1 because of all the facts that I have mentioned before. And water is also tikkun olam, healing the world. Israel is willing, as Ron Prosor, the former ambassador to the UN, said, Israel is willing to share its knowledge and its know-how with the world, and the world needs Israel for that. Last but not least, in the last, I would say, 5 years, I led and ran, I can't say amazing, but wonderful water missions to Israel, really showing all the aspects of water from A to Z, from the north and the farmers, through the high techs and the water technologies, desalination plants and wastewater treatment plants, farmers in the south, research and development all over Israel, understanding the water economy and the water aspect in Israel. This year, because of the COVID, there's a great opportunity to do it virtually. In fact, Brenda and Michael, our co-chairs of the evening, have done it with me at the beginning of January. It's only 4 days a week, 2 hours a day from 12 to 2 Eastern time. The second mission is going to take place in February 8th to 11th, and the third one from March 15th to the 18th. You are very welcome to join us and to experience as much as we can give you online and virtually, with great speakers, great visits, great presentations, learning more about Israel's successes in water. Last but not least, again, Shimon Peres, our late Prime Minister, said, we're cultivating fish without water, veggies without soil, and lettuce without roots. We take salt out of the sea and sand out of the desert. That's it, guys. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Tali, thank you very much. We'll take questions. You can either raise your hand and we'll unmute you, or you can put them in the chat. We'd love to have a few questions for Tali.
There's been talk for a number of years about the canal between the Red Sea and the Dead Sea, or between the Dead Sea and the Mediterranean. Has there been any progress
Okay.
made in that regard?
So the first discussion was about building a canal from the Mediterranean to the Dead Sea, transferring water and creating energy by pumping water from the Mediterranean and bringing it. For that, remember, guys, the Dead Sea doesn't belong only to Israel. Dead Sea belongs to Israel and Jordan. For filling the Dead Sea with water, despite the fact that, it sounds as if it's, everybody wants to save the Dead Sea because it's drying up, you need the approval of Jordan. Jordan has no interest in filling the Dead Sea. Jordan is interested in getting more water in their faucet, because they only have water in their faucets once a week. So the Med-Dead Canal is not relevant now. So they moved to the Red Sea is all the way in the south. It's between Israel and Jordan, bringing water from the Red Sea into the Dead Sea. For that, again, you need Jordan, but Jordan has an interest. What is the interest of Jordan? Remember, I mentioned the desalination plant in Aqaba. If Israel and Jordan are going to build together a joint desalination plant in Aqaba, according to the Jordanians' need, they will supply water from Jordan to the Arava Valley, which is located in Israel with the Israeli farmers. And in return, Jordan will get more water from the Kinneret, because they already have the infrastructure getting water from the Kinneret. The brine that will be produced from the desalination plant in Aqaba, instead of transferring or flowing it back to the Red Sea, will flow into the Dead Sea and will help, not fill the Dead Sea. The problem is more diplomatic problem. But, between Israel, it's a long story, Norman, and I'm happy to speak with you later on, because I don't want to hold everyone, for a long time. But there's tension between Israel and Jordan. There is a need for a huge investment and commitment to build any desalination plant. Jordan is one of the poorest countries around the world. They cannot commit to buy water. The World Bank wants to help them. Because of all of these facts that I'm not going to overwhelm you with, it's still not happening. So the Red-Dead Canal is still on hold, but we're hoping that it's going to happen in the future. And I'm happy to give you more than that if you want to speak, in another.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question. Judith, Jerry, unmute yourself. Hold on, you're still muted. There you go.
There you go. Actually, it's just a point. In '72, I was a volunteer on a kibbutz where I was doing irrigation work, and it was basically open pipes that had to be connected. So the water was flowing. It was a great deal of waste. And when I returned the following year in '73, it was amazing that they had switched over to the drip irrigation, and how well it worked, and everything is measured, so it's just exactly what is needed, and nothing is wasted in that regard, and I love my own drip irrigation right here in Scarsdale.
What kibbutz were you at?
Givat Chaim Miuchad.
So let me tell you a very quick funny anecdote. We have great collaboration, and Brenda and Michael heard is the guy from Kibbutz Hatzerim, who was one of the founders of Netafim, the drip irrigation company. And he shared with us, if you remember, Brenda, he shared with us that when they found out in Kibbutz Hatzerim about the drip irrigation, they found out that not only do they save water and they have to pay less for water, they're increasing the yield because of the efficiency of the drip irrigation. So they were so happy, they said, let's keep it as a secret. Let's not tell anyone in Israel what we have. Today, the company was sold for billions of dollars because of its worth, not only for Israel, not only for Kibbutz Hatzerim, not only for Israel, for the entire world.
Technology.
Thank you. If we don't have any other questions, we're going to play the video that we had a little technical difficulty with at the beginning. So if you don't mind, we're going to share our screen, play the video, and then we'll have our closing remarks.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diana Sklar, and I'm the president of the Westchester, Southern Connecticut region for JNF. What an incredible program we just had. Thank you so much to Josh Greenstein and Talia Tsor for sharing their passion and expertise with us on water and wine. It's really great to see so many familiar faces tonight, and it's also wonderful to see so many new faces as well. It's safe to say that most, if not all of you here on this Zoom have a very special connection to Israel. And if you don't yet, hopefully you soon will. As you hopefully witnessed a bit tonight, JNF prides itself on taking care of Israel. It is truly a special organization that does incredible things, but we need your help. Your donations go a long way in helping JNF support all the many programs it sponsors. Please take a moment and fill out the pledge card you might have received with your wine purchase, the link on the email you received, or the text. Whatever you can contribute would be greatly appreciated. Before we say goodnight, we also want to remind you to please save the date for April 18th, 2021 for this year's Breakfast in Israel. Breakfast for Israel. It will no doubt be another great event celebrating Israel and Yom HaAtzmaut, Israel's Independence Day. Thank you all so much for coming to our event tonight. Stay safe, stay warm, and stay well. Good night.
Good night.
פעם היית ילד אז לפני שנה